opportunity, especially for female scientists who are participating. And I think a lot of you, like myself, would like to hear a lot of inspiring stories from Jessica as a very successful women researcher. And next, we would like to again remind you on the rundown for today's event. So I will act as your moderator. My name is Sastia Putri from Osaka University, and I'm also the chair for ForMIND Institute. The first, we will have opening remarks from Professor Oki Kanarajasa, Director of Research and Community Service from the Ministry of Research and Technology, National Research and Innovation Agency. And afterwards, we will have a talk by Associate Professor Jessica Lasky-Su from Harvard University on establishing yourself in the field and women in science. And don't forget, we will also have picture taking to commemorate this special event that we are gathered everyone here to hopefully always in a healthy condition. And we will have a Q&A session before we close this seminar. Okay, so now we would like to welcome the opening remarks from Professor Oki Kanarajasa. Professor Oki, the time is all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sastia. It is a great honor for me to deliver my opening remark for the last session of the World Class Scientist Seminar. And I would love also to thank ForTi and Indonesian Young Scientist Forum for organizing this with our ministry. Special thanks to Jessica, Professor Jessica, for providing your time to share your experience to Indonesian scientists. So please allow me to start my remark on with your reputation, we need more women in science. When we talk about women, especially achieving gender equality and empower all women, all right, women and girls, actually within sustainable development goals, especially number 5, it relates to more than 40 targets to gender, human rights, women and girls. So it is globally acknowledged that providing gender equality and social inclusion is very important for every country, including in Indonesia. How do we, the ministry, accommodate the issue on gender equality and social inclusion? So basically, within our online system, we allow the Indonesian scientists to select research focus, followed by theme as well as topic when they apply for particular national research priority between 2020 to 2024. Yes, on the right, you can see there are 9 different research focus, including multidisciplinary and across sectors. So we, by design, we have provided a GESI perspective within the system so that it will reflect the GESI perspective within our research and national priority. This is an example of how our funded proposal in the last 3 years. So in 2018, we have funded almost 46% of the female scientists who apply for our project. So in 2019, out of the total of approximately 12,000 projects, about 47% the principal investigator were women. So a good result in 2020 even, there are 49% of the principal investigator are female that receive funding from our ministry. So this is a good sign how we try to support more women in science. Again, we also thanks to Royal Indonesia for supporting the science program, especially for women in science, to support the program that the world needs science, science needs women. And even we are more serious, especially in 2020. Jessica, I have to inform you that we have 3,250 plus universities. We are the biggest number in terms of the number of university in the world. So we have too many universities. So in order to maintain the quality of Indonesian universities, we have conducted what we call it the ranking or clustering of Indonesian university based on research. It has been running for 12 years. It is conducted every 3 years. And the second one is the clustering of Indonesian university based on community empowerment uh, performances. So how this will affect the university? Both research and community empowerment clusters will define how much money they will receive based on the cluster they belong to. In addition, it will also allow them to manage what we call decentralized research grant or community empowerment grant. So this year, I expect to soon release the third ranking of Indonesian university based on gender equality and social inclusion perspective. These are the analysis of data of the KC perspective. So basically, there are four evaluation component of our ranking. Number one is resources responsible for the 40%, and then management of research, and then number three is output of research, and then last but not least is revenue generating. Of course, all these evaluation component will be very much related to KC perspective. And this is how the ranking analysis work. So we have several database that can measure the performance of Indonesian university, especially uh, based on research performances, and then we will do the data verification and will select and separate the GC data, and finally we will have the score for the final grade. And why we need this? This is also very important because we would like to maintain the national standard of for research as outlined within our national higher education standard. So when we will release the result, then basically Indonesian university will be clustered into four different cluster, very strong, and then strong, moderate, and weak. And this, just like other country that have implemented the KC perspective, we would like also to relate this with the uh, quota for research budget for those having very good performance on KC perspective. And I would like also to take this opportunity to bring you all to what we call it Athena Swan Charter Award. I believe some of you are already familiar with this. This is a charter managed by the UK Equality Challenge Unit, now is Advanced Higher Education, that was established in 2005, that recognize organization commitment to and progress on equality, diversity, particularly race and gender in STEM. And then in 2015, the charter was expanded to include the non-STEM department, including art, humanities, social sciences, business, and law. And there are three types of awards: bronze, silver, and gold. And members who sign for the charter are expected to apply for Athena Swan Charter Award at bronze, silver, and gold level. Unfortunately, so far there is no single Indonesian university has applied for that. So this is one of our uh, goals to have selected Indonesian university to submit to become the member and submit the application for the Athena Swan Charter Award. And It is based on the 10 key principles. For example, when we talk about sorry, we talk about how the ecosystem need to be built within research and university to create a better environment that will support gender equality, and as well as how the inclusion of all members that will be benefit for the institution. So my last slide. What's the next plan for Ministry of Research Technology here? After we have conducted the ranking of university based on KC perspective, we plan to have several Indonesian university based on the ranking that will be guided and empowered to prepare submission of the application for the Athena Swan Charter Award in the next 2 or 3 years. Again, Jessica, thank you so much for your willingness and your opportunity to share your expertise and experience. And for everybody, it is very good opportunity. Please make use this opportunity wisely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Oki, for wonderful, wonderful talk and for being here again to support this event. It's really, really great to have you with us and also to have you introduce to us the positive actions that the Ministry of Research and Science and Technology is doing in order to promote gender equality. So very lucky to have you with us. And I would like to invite everyone for a photo session before we move on to the main speaker. We would like to ask you to please turn on your video and we'll take a group photo together. Okay, so you can unshare your screen, Sri. Okay, please unshare the screen. Sri? Yes. And now we are ready to take a picture together. Everyone, please turn on your video. I'll give you a count of 3. Okay, maybe you can do like whatever gesture, fun gesture. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more because we have many participants here. It's not enough in one screen. One more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for turning on your video. It's really nice to have like lots and lots of nice pictures here. Okay, so we're going to move on to the main speaker, which is Associate Professor Jessica Lasky-Su, a good friend of mine, and also a very highly reputable scientist from Harvard University. She's now working in the Faculty of Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School. I always think that Harvard is one of the best universities in the world. And also medical school is one of the most difficult faculties to enter, and she's in both. So I can imagine how great she is as a woman in science, and she's doing really great research as well. So it's really an honor for us that she's willing to talk for the Indonesian community, Indonesian scientific communities, on the topic about her research, her role as a woman in science, as well as team building and networking, and also some points also on getting grants. So all in all is going to be explained to her in the presentation. So her research interest is in the identification of genetics, genomics, and metabolomics determinants for complex diseases. She is also an epidemiologist, and also we were a part of the board member of the Metabolomics Society, and now she's also the chairman of the Consortium for Metabolomic Studies. Okay, Jessica, time is yours. Please.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, and can everyone see my slides? Great. So I want to thank Sastia Putrita for inviting me. As she said, we've had a fabulous time and relationship as we've been on the board of the Metabolomics Society. This talk actually probably is one of the most exciting talks that I can remember giving recently. And that is because I think a lot of what I'm going to be speaking about today is critically important, yet we don't speak about it. And a lot of these conversations are not really ever had. And so it really challenged me to think about a lot of ways where I was able to establish myself in science and the field, and how did I do it? And one of the things I talk about a lot with my mentees is this whole issue of women in science and work-life balance. And I hope that in the discussion today that we can really be thinking about this. Now, I recognize the discussion and my perspective is the perspective of someone where I'm living and not necessarily this perspective where you're living. And I would love to get more input on that and different challenges that you may have that I may not be thinking of when I share my perspective. I'm going to start off this talk by really talking in three general areas. Number one is to tell you a little bit about myself. And as I said, this is not a typical talk I do. And one thing you're going to see in this talk is a lot more about myself, especially a lot more about my family than I have typically share in talks, that's for sure. A little bit about my evolution in terms of my research career and how that has happened sort of simultaneously with what's happened in my life. Success for my academic and research career and how really that came about. And I think a lot of this area of success, I'm not only going to be talking about some things I did, but I'm going to be talking a lot about my mindset, because I think the mindset that you have throughout your career really will dictate a lot of your success. But I'm going to be talking about that in terms of how I became independent and what was key there. You know, building a network, how do you do that? Supporting your own research, how do you get research grants? And building and sustaining a research team and my perspective of the best way to do that. And then finally, I'm going to end by talking about quite a bit about this issue of work-life balance and particularly for women in science. I think this tends to be a more challenging area. Balancing, you know, the needs of the family and a growing family, your individual interests, you know, what you can do to really help in that, and what types of expectations you may be putting on yourself. So, as I said, I'm going to start with a bit about me. And this is, as I said, not how I typically present something, but I think this is really important to get a flavor of different areas and ways that I've operated in my research career. My background in education, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to a very good college for my undergrad. I actually went to Cornell University for my undergraduate education. This is primarily driven by my two parents who were the first people to go to college in their family. And somehow my father, who's a really smart guy, was able to not only go to college, but then actually get his PhD at Cornell when I was a kid. So this was really influential in how I started to see the world, because at a really young age, I was 7 and 8, and both of my parents were actually graduate students, full-time. Me and my siblings would make dinner at home. My mom would leave out a recipe. We'd make dinner at home because they would be at the lab late. And so the idea of academics was something that I was introduced to very early. And it was really the first time my parents or I had any level of exposure to, you want to go to a college, but you want to go to a good college. And that was really something that I think my parents learned as first-time college, college grads, but really embraced and supported us through. So I got my undergraduate degree at Cornell in statistics and with a little bit of an emphasis in genetics. I got my master's degree in statistics and genetics at Purdue. And then I went on to get my doctoral degree in epidemiology at Harvard School of Public Health. Now, I have to say, 6 months ago, not everyone knew what an epidemiologist is, but I think most people know what an epidemiologist is now because of COVID. But that is, as we all know now, someone who looks at diseases and studies either their origins or risk factors, or studies the progression of diseases, or in COVID's case, how the various parameters of how that may spread through a society. And I've been now doing research since 1999, although I didn't get my doctorate degree until 2005, and have been doing research in this general area, for 15 to 20 years. And I'm now an associate professor at Harvard Medical School, and my affiliate hospital is Brigham and Women's Hospital. So that's a bit of background about me academically. And let me just give you an idea of what's happened simultaneous to that background. I got my master's degree in 1999, and I got married in 1999 to my husband. We met in college. Throughout this time, we had 4 kids. Here they are. We now have Christian, 15, Lily, 14, Nathaniel, who's almost 10, and William, who's almost 7. And we've now been married 21 years. This, I think, comes to one of these first initial challenges, which is even having kids while you're in the middle of an academic research career. And as you'll go through these slides, you'll see a few things about me. And one thing I would say is this word determined comes up quite a bit. And when I was in graduate school, I was determined to finish in 2.5 years. I mean, I'd studied the system. I'd done a lot of research. I thought it was possible. So about 2.5 years in, I defended my thesis and gave birth to my son, Christian, a week later. So I had it planned out to a T to have him right after I finished my doctoral degree. Now, a bit else about me, and I'm bringing this up here because I think it's important when we have these discussions about work-life balance. There's a lot of things I could say that I'm passionate about and things that I do. But one of the things I think most people who know me well know is that I'm an avid runner, and I run marathons. That's actually a passion of mine. And I'm, especially for my age, quite competitive. I'm usually, for my age, depending on the size of the marathon, maybe in the top 1 or 2. If it's a more competitive marathon like the Boston Marathon, I'm in top percentile. But just suffice it to say, for all of us, when we have passions take time. And that's one of the things I want us to think about, and I'll get back to in some future slides. Okay, a bit more about my research career and what really happened and how I got to where I am today. Very early on, when I was an undergraduate, my father said to me, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. And he said to me, Jessica, you're good at math. You should do statistics, because everywhere I go, people need statistics. So it would be a good thing to choose. So without much thinking, I was like, okay, I'll do statistics. And really, when you think about it, from the perspective of something that you're going to major in, or maybe something you'll do the rest of your life, I'm not really sure I thought a lot about it when I made that decision, other than, yeah, I'm good at math. This seems like a good fit. But what that did start me on is this trajectory where, when I was in my undergraduate education and doing statistics, I did statistics with biology. I met actually my first statistics teacher, and you'll see her in some slides coming up. She also was doing genetics. And she had talked about this way where you could incorporate statistics and genetics to look at things. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And so that was something I grasped onto. Now I'll say early on, the way she was doing it is she was looking at sort of like the genetics of rice and plants and animals. That really wasn't as much of an interest to me, but I figured, oh, well, genetics seems like something interesting. So I'll sort of look into that area. As time went on, I went not only from genetics, but I really took my background in statistics and genetics and really switched it to sort of the human focus of disease. And I'm going to talk more about that later and why that was a good move. But suffice it to say, I think that's really when things for me really started to resonate into areas that I was really interested in. And through that, I was then introduced to this concept of metabolomics, measurement of small molecules in a biospecimen. And now have developed, a research career where I'm looking at multiple omics, really with a basis now being metabolomics, but integrating things like genetic variants or methylation or gene expression, and looking at those in combination to identify potential pathways for disease or predictors of disease or understand disease. And fortunately for me, this really happened sort of simultaneous to what I'm calling the omics revolution, which was really this uptake from like the late 1990s until now with genetics primarily, but then followed by all of these other omic methods. Okay, so that's a bit about my research. Now, this is a slide I've never included before, but again, I think this is important because it gives you a little bit of perspective of where I am. I think one thing when we look at research careers and we look at where we are, I have never thought of myself as that special person who's going to do really well. I just never have. And, as a matter of fact, early on in my career, I would say I was more interested in research because I found it interesting, but I didn't necessarily think it was a passion. It was interesting. I liked the intellectual engagement, but it wasn't, I think at that point in my life, really my family and other things were the driving factors and still are in many ways, rightfully so. But somewhere along the way, and I'll talk a little bit again about that later, I think worlds and interests and things collided. And as I say, I don't actually consider myself someone who's special in terms of any talents necessarily per se in the field. But with the right tools and with meeting the right people and with networking, I have at quite an early age, especially in the last 5 years, had an explosion in my career. And I'd always been pretty good at publications. I don't actually even know what they are now. They're somewhere between 150 and 200. My H-index is about 54, which for someone who's, in her mid 40s is quite good. The grant success of my group right now is probably one of the best in the nation. And I hadn't even thought about it until I realized that we have gotten our last 10 grants in a row we've gotten on the first time, and most of those are, multi-million dollar grants. So we've had this unbelievable success rate with grants. I've had this growing research team with amazing people on it who have great talent and really are vibrant investigators, and have been able to develop a national and international reputation quite fast. Having said all that, though, I actually consider the one thing to me that really made me sit back and be like, wow, I can't believe this, was last year, and this is a picture of it. There was a competition at Harvard, Harvard Medical School, among faculty who were in my point in career, where they were quite established. But this was a specific competition where they wanted to identify the best. And then they were going to give us basically $100,000 for 3 years in a row, just discretionary for our research. And in this competition, you know, I had my initial group that I had to compete against was everyone who was in internal medicine. So that was by far probably 10 times bigger than any of the other initial fields that you would get siphoned down into, because they could only pick 3 people even from internal medicine to get to the next round. And so suffice it to say, out of researchers at Harvard, which to me was sort of, you're looking at sort of the best of the best, I won one of these research positions, and then had several people just comment after how much my application stood out. And it really shocked me, because I thought to myself, I don't picture myself there. But it really made me grateful and gave me a little bit more context that, wow, I guess, you know, I am in a different place. Now, I bring all this up, not at all to sound like I'm bragging, and that's not the intent. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because this, especially much more recent, rapid and growing success, had me think about a lot of things about myself and how I operate that maybe provides clues into how to get there. But the first thing I want to point out that I think is crucially important, and is one of the biggest, most important things that I want you to know, is the following. When I think of myself and I think of my career path, I have made a ton of mistakes as a researcher, as a mother, as a wife. And a lot of those could have ended any one of those things. I have had a tremendous number of failures along my academic journey, you know, from failing my qualifying exam when I took it the first time, to not being able to get my first larger grants, you know, to definitely feeling, you know, because of this, you know, there's a lot of people around me that are a lot smarter than me. You know, I don't particularly think of myself as the brightest bulb in the box of people at Harvard. But what I want you to remember is you are going to make a ton of mistakes. You're going to fail so many times, and you're going to feel inadequate. And in all those things, you could say that's a big problem. But what I want you to know is none of those problems matter. All of those problems are completely irrelevant. What is crucial is how you respond to those problems. And that is how you pick yourself up, how you try again, how you think of different ways, how you think to yourself, how can I fulfill this inadequacy? I'm not good in this area, but who can help me? Okay, I failed here. Let's try another strategy. Okay, you know, I made this mistake. I failed my qualifying exam. Should I just quit and change careers, or should I try another strategy? And what I did in that case was I decided to go from hardcore statistics into epidemiology, which was probably the best research move I made. So pivoting and your response to these things is crucially important in your success. So having that as a background, I want to now give you some different tips for success academically and for research that I've thought about along the way. And some of these are tangible, but other of these are along this line of how can you set yourself up with the right mindset that's going to make you get through and get to that point where, wow, I'm really succeeding, with recognizing that you have a lot of shortcomings. Okay, so one of the things I think that happened with me that was crucially important in me sort of going from this point where I liked my research career. I always have liked the intellectual challenge of being in research and being around smart people. That was always something that I resonated with. But I think one of the big changes for me when it came to my research was giving it a little bit more relevance and purpose. And I alluded to earlier on that I initially studied genetics in my master's degree when I was doing statistics, in combination with plants and food. So it was like the genetics of plants and the genetics of rice. Well, I do like rice, and I'm assuming you all like rice too, but I don't care that much about the genetics of rice. Now, what do I care about when it comes to genetics? And really that was moving that skill set and being able to pivot that skill set from looking at it in a context of plants and animals to humans. All of a sudden, then I'm like, the genetics of humans, I care a lot about. And why is that? It's because it has direct relevance to me in many ways. I care about how my genetics influences my longevity. I care about how we may be able to find medicine for certain genetics that helps personalize how we treat. Not only that, I then actually stumbled upon a research group at Harvard that was through networking that was actually looking at the genetics of asthma. Now, why was this important? Well, if you look here in the middle of these pictures, this is me when I was 8 years old. And this is me in an oxygen tent. I've had pretty significant asthma my whole life. So it was something I resonated with, and I was personally important. But not only was it personally important for me, what you see here is two pictures, here and here. And this is my son, Nathaniel. He's my third. And not only do I have asthma, but my son, Nathaniel, has really had debilitating allergies early in life and continues to have my asthma. So this motivation and this purpose of looking at genetics now with respect to humans, but with respect to a disease I have, but I would say more so with respect to a disease that affects my son, that I could actually potentially affect in some ways his life, really became a much more motivating factor. When I'm asking research questions, that's motivating. Wow, I could actually do something that might have an effect on me and my family. Another thing I think that's crucial when it comes to thinking about success is the identification of a mentor. This fellow in this picture, his name is Scott Weiss. He's in his early 70s. He is one of the most influential people in asthma research today, certainly asthma and genetic research today. And he has been a tremendous mentor and role model to me. Now, there's a couple things I want to mention. He's been incredibly academically successful, and I've really have leaned on that. And he's given me a lot of guidance in different ways that I've gone. But some of his characteristics and traits that make him such a good mentor and leader are not just the academics. One of them is a genuine care about my success. And I think this is important because often we may have someone who our main mentor is someone who we could end up in competition with, or they want to see you prove yourself. But sometimes because of that, put roadblocks in your way. And even if you have to stay with that mentor, I would recommend you get another mentor who really their primary goal is to see you succeed and is going to help you navigate when you have those failures. I said there's going to be a lot of failures. Have someone who's going to help you pivot and rethink. Have someone who's going to be encouraging to you, but honest, right? That's important. We want encouragement. Scott is certainly an optimist, but he would also be honest if he really thought something that was not good. Have someone who is okay with family-like balance, who isn't going to guilt you if you need to leave because you have a crisis with your kid. Have someone who is a connector, and they don't necessarily need to be exactly in your field, but still is able to connect you with other people. And finally, and I think this is crucially important, have someone who is emotionally intelligent. And when I say that, and I actually remember my father saying this to me when I was looking for my PhD thesis advisor. He said, you don't want someone who's going to be screaming at you, who's going to be a loose cannon and loses it all the time. You want someone who's even keeled and can look at things objectively and provide you advice. And when you're in a crisis, is not going to make it worse by screaming and yelling at you, but is going to guide you through. And I think those are all really important things in a mentor. And if you don't necessarily have all those in your current mentor or people that you're around, what I would suggest is finding other people who can fill the slots. And I actually did that when I actually found another mentor who was a female mentor who additionally mentored me on some of the aspects of being a woman in science. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is grant funding success. Now, I looked at your other list of amazing speakers in the seminar series, and I know that you had a whole webinar on this. So I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but there's a few things I do want to bring up because I think they were crucial in my career. And one is step number one, and this is something it's taken me a little bit of time to realize, but I think is really important. And that is there is a formula to a good grant. Even if it's in a lot of different topic areas, there's a formula to how to write a good grant. And if you can hone in on what that formula is, your chances of success will go up again and again. This right here is one of my colleagues, Benji Raby. He is now the chairman of pediatric pulmonology at Children's Hospital and is a professor at Harvard Medical School. And he was one of the people who pointed out this second point to me. He said, Jessica, when you're writing good, big grants, really large scale grants, if you're the only one you're trying to say is an expert, that's a problem. That is not a good grant. The best grants, you are pulling people in who are experts in other areas that can complement you to create the best team. And I thought that was hugely important. And so now, whenever I look at a grant, if there's an area I'm deficient, it's not about me learning, it's about me finding the right person. And I put up here my colleague Craig Wheelock, because he really has been one of those people for me. Another thing I want to say about grants is feedback. And I also put Benji Raby up here because I think until my streak, I know at one point he had one of the highest success rates of grants at the entire National Institute of Health in the United States. And finding people who can give you good feedback is incredibly important. And he is a master at it. And even though right now he's actually at a different hospital than me and I don't see him, I would still call on him to give me feedback. And the last thing I want to point out is this: more numbers, more chances. If you need to get grants to support your research, the more you submit, the better your chances. And then by doing that, you also fall into this paradigm where you try again. The more you try, the more you learn that formula and you more figure it out. And then you have increased rates of success. So just a couple things I'm going to say about the formula with the grant process. When I think of the grant process, and this is the type of thing, I'm happy to help people out and provide more input on this type of thing, you know, at another date if people wanted to follow up. But this is what I've sort of realized, what things you need to say. You need to create a need. The number one thing is you need to say, whatever you're doing, this is absolutely essential. We need to do this. And you need to create that need by showing that you can do it with some preliminary data, but then also in that preliminary data, showing why that even highlights how much you need what you're proposing in this grant. You need to also clearly say why now is the best time to do it. Going to that point of having a team that has people on it besides you with different expertise, you always need to say, when you're writing this grant, your team is the best to do it. Not only good, but it's the best. And this is why. And if you don't feel like it's the best, try to collaborate or find some people who you do think are the best. You need to have it very clearly stated. If the grant is not clear, and I will say this from reading a lot of grants, it just automatically goes down on my list of what a good grant is if I can't really grasp easily what they're saying they're doing. And finally, and this may be a little bit subjective, I'm a big fan of good figures because I think good figures can say a lot. And I just pulled this out of actually one of my more recent grants. And again, this is a $4 million grant we got on the first try. So not bad. But spending time to really think out what you're doing and putting it in a picture framework, because that often helps the reviewers evaluate it and they can refer back to it. So what other things are important in success? And by and large, I would say networking. Now I'm saying networking with a context that I'm not really a good networker. I don't see myself as a good networker. But how have I actually become a successful networker? And this is my key to you. You know, if you're not a good networker, that doesn't matter. You just find one or two people who are good networkers and stick with them, because they will network you. If they know how to network, they're going to network you all the time. And I have on here some key people, and I'll tell you, you know, it goes all the way back to when I was an undergraduate at Cornell, and Rebecca Dorch here, at the time, she was a postdoctoral fellow who taught my first statistics class with genetics. She was the one who made that connection with statistics and genetics. She was only a postdoc, and she ended up then going to Purdue for her to become a professor. And I really liked her personality, and I met her in my first class. Well, she ended up, you know, being instrumental in getting me into Purdue. She was the one who showed me about genetics and statistics, even though it was Rice, and I said Rice was a little boring for me. Fast forward now, she's the dean at Carnegie Mellon. And so suffice it to say, she has been a great connector over the years. You know, I mentioned Scott, my main mentor. He has been a tremendous connector. But I think part of it is thinking of connectors in different areas. And this person over here, Christoph Lang, he is a world famous statistician in genetics, and was someone I met just as a graduate student. And he was the one who connected me to Scott, who gave me all these other opportunities. Krista Zanetti, who Sasti and I both know, is an incredible connector. And she's really connected me to a lot of these national organizations. And so I don't really consider myself a good connector. As much as I may seem vivacious and I am an extrovert, sometimes in meetings I get more shy. But through these connections and meeting people, it's enabled me to be less and less shy. The last person I want to point out here, the last two people I'd mentioned, Craig, who is now, I was connected to. He was someone that I just walked up to him and met him, but I met him because my postdoc at the time, Rachel Kelly, was the one who was sitting next to me, and we were talking, and she's like, we have to go up and meet him. He's doing asthma and metabolomics. Let's meet him. And so we walked up together. So she's the one who sort of got me out of my bubble to meet Craig, who is now one of our close collaborators. So remember, while network people who can help you network are also people who may be more senior or in different areas, they can also be your postdocs. Don't just think up and out, think in your group. Okay, and I just want to say a bit about national organizations. You know, I think it's important to get yourself out there and to get involved and to volunteer. And a lot of this is because this is where you meet people, and this is where you make those connections that may transform your career. You know, we all know wherever we are, and even at Harvard, there may be, there may be people other places who can help us more or connect us. And if we don't reach out in terms of both national and international organizations, we won't meet those people and get those opportunities. So even if you're nervous, I would encourage you, everyone else is, when you go into a room and you don't know anyone, there's a lot of other people who don't know anyone else either. But if you get involved, especially if it's on a small thing to start with, you'll get to meet people quickly. And that will really start to establish that network. Okay, this next section, I think, is probably the biggest section in terms of overall success. And I'm talking, what I'm talking about here is individual characteristics and parts of your personality. Now, when I say that, I want us to all understand there are parts of our personality that we inherently can't change, but there are some things about who we are that we can change, shape, and form. And those are some of the things I want to talk about. And the good news is, I think every one of you here likely has aspects of all of these traits in you now. And it's not necessarily being the smartest person in the room. So what are these traits? Okay, I don't know who has heard of this book, but this is a book by a woman named Angela Duckworth called Grit. And grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years. Grit is a stubborn refusal to quit. And this, my friends, is the number one thing I think you need to be successful. And that means sticking with it. It means staying in one research area. Now, general research area. I'm going to talk about pivoting within a research area, but people who become highly successful in any area, but definitely in research, are people who have studied it over and over and put in hours upon hours of research. And while they may expand it one way or another, that accumulates over time. So while I didn't even know this, when I did my undergraduate degree in statistics and genetics, and then sort of stayed in the field, but sort of fine-tuned it to be human genetics with diseases I was interested in, and just kept on plowing away at that field, and then expanding it to metabolomics, which was different, but still in the same general range of looking at omics and disease. I was abiding by this idea of grit, where you stay in an area and you focus and you learn more and more and become an expert. Now, there's a lot of aspects of grit I want to talk about. And one of them is what I would call the stubborn refusal to quit. Remember that? I want to give you guys, again, I said you're going to hear a lot about my personal life here, a bit of background about me in the last 6 months. I think you may remember I said I'm sort of passionate about running. Well, you'll also see I like having family time, and in February is winter here. I decided we would go on a skiing trip with my family. I never skied before, but I wanted us to learn because my older kids knew how to ski. We're right near the great skiing areas, and I figured we'd learn to ski as a family. I made the mistake of borrowing my skis from an expert skier. I'll just tell you, never do that. And ended up falling and fracturing my tibia and fibula. And I was ski lifted off the mountain. I had emergency surgery, and I was on the mend. However, unfortunately, I ended up like 3 or 4 months later, all of a sudden one day noticed a lot of pain in my bone. And all of a sudden it was becoming harder to walk on, even though I had been rehabbing quite a bit and was quite a ways along, and went to look into this and found out I had now 2 bacteria that had infected my whole bone. And it was very dangerous. If I didn't get surgery right away, I could have lost my leg. So I had emergency surgery in the middle of COVID to get all of the hardware out of my leg. I then had to be on antibiotics for IV antibiotics for 7 weeks with, nothing in my leg. I couldn't put any weight on it. And then just a few weeks ago, I had another surgery to check out my leg and put a new rod in and new screws. And it really has only been within literally the last week that I have been able to start any rehab, aggressive rehab in the last, now months since this has happened. So why am I bringing this up? And like I said, you find out a lot about me. I'm bringing this up for a couple of reasons. Of all my traits, and there's a lot of things I am not skilled at, I am probably one of the grittiest people I know when it comes to things I'm passionate about. I am just a grit machine. Now, I think some of that is genetics. It's being brought up in a family with 2 siblings that I wanted to be the best at. It's naturally being competitive. It is in my blood. But throughout the whole thing, my attitude with my leg has been pretty much steady. And, I'm like, I'm going to get back to it. And I remember when my mentor said to me, Jessica, you may never run again like you used to. He was saying this to me just randomly in a Zoom call. And I thought to myself, he doesn't know me, because if he knew me, he would know, and he knew that I run a lot. He knew that I run marathons. He would know that because I'm so gritty, there's no way this leg is going to let me down. And just to prove a point, I'm going to run the 2021 Boston Marathon. And I don't even care if I have to walk part of it, but I'm going to do it because I want to show that I can do it. And this has not got me down. And I think that's the attitude we need to take about research, especially when we have setbacks. So my question to you today is, what will you do when you have bumps along the road? Because you will have bumps along the road. What happens when you're stuck in your research? What happens when you don't get research grants and you may actually be short on money? What happens when you have a conflict with a colleague? And now I'm going to tell you this. What happens when someone you trust tells you you need to give up because you're not good enough? Because I'll tell you, my amazing mentor from Purdue, who is the one who got me into statistics and genetics, pretty much told me this when I was a master's student and I failed that qualifying exam. Another one of my colleagues told me this when I was having trouble getting my first big grant. I'd already gotten some, but I hadn't gotten a big one. So what are you going to do when someone tells you to give up? And my answer is, don't. Look for a different way. Look for an alternate path. So never let someone with the significance of a speed bump become your roadblock. Think of different ways, and you make the decision about what you're going to do and what your path to success is. Now, there may be times where the right choice is to pivot and change directions, but I don't think that means giving up. I think it is important to recognize that that may happen, but that's different than giving up. But what I want to tell you is, don't let necessarily someone's very narrow view of who you are determine your future. So this concept of persistence, I think, is key for academic success. It's starting, thinking, analyzing, planning, trying. You're probably going to fail. You have to try again. You're going to fail. You have to try again. You're going to keep on doing that for a long, long time until you get to success. But if you know that's part of the process, it's really going to enable you to achieve that success. A couple other things I want to point out here. And my boss, Scott, said this to me very early on. He said to me, Jessica, I'm not the smartest person at Harvard. I'm probably in the lowest half of people here. I'm not that smart. I'm pretty smart, but, I'm smart. I'm not anywhere near what I would consider is smart. He said, you know what, but I work really hard. I have a good personality. You know, I'm persistent. There's one other thing he said, but I'm going to wait until the future slide. And I've a good outlook on what's happening and what I'm going to do next. And I think all of those things cumulatively tend to be undervalued, while often intelligence is overvalued, especially if it's intelligence with not the right other skill sets to make it effective. And this is the other thing he said to me. You know, I may not be the most intelligent, but I have a lot of ideas and I'm creative. And I think that is why I have been so successful. And I thought about that. And you know what, the first few times he said this to me, I thought, yeah, you are, but I'm not. You know, it's a great skill you have, but I'm not really. Well, one thing I've realized is as I've gone along, I've realized you can expand your creativity and you can expand your ideas. And now I really am creative. And I really do have a lot of ideas. Part of that, I'll tell you, is spurred on by the team, which I'm going to talk to in a little bit. But creativity and ideas are something that you can build. And here's just one example, you know, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but through some thought process with myself and my team, we really have developed what I would call a complete step for utilizing metabolomics all the way through to clinical translation in a way that can impact asthma in me and my son. And this is something we're writing up right now for the New England Journal, but we have really done a study that really has gone from looking in blood to a clinical recommendation. And it wasn't, the actual science of it wasn't hard. It was the creativity and idea of putting steps together to be able to make these inferences. So creativity is essential. Another thing I want to talk about is this. There are a lot of opportunities that we will have in our career path, but also often with opportunity, there is risk. And it can be scary. You know, it may be the opportunity of moving positions and not knowing the unknown. It may be the opportunity of moving to a different place in your country or in the world. But, you know, you can see an opportunity, but assessing it and seizing that opportunity and assessing, you know, the risk, and that you have to have some risk, but that sometimes that risk is really worth the transformation, I think is something that we often need to do is to get out of our comfort zone and seize those opportunities that we may see. Finally, in this part, I just want to talk about this idea of being able to pivot. And I referred to this earlier when I said that, you know, when I started out, I was really doing genetics of asthma. One day I was walking with my friend Benji, and he said to me, and this was right when I was having trouble getting a big grant. And he said to me, you know, Jessica, metabolomics is really something that's up and coming. You should write your grant on metabolomics and asthma. And in the same conversation, I was like, well, I haven't done that. He's like, you don't need to. Don't forget, you don't need to be the expert in everything. Find the expert and do it with that person. So I found Clary Klish at the Broad and had him doing the metabolomics and me doing the epidemiology. And I got my first metabolomics grant, which really resulted in a cascade of opportunity and success. So my point is being able to make small pivots and reaching out to people to help you can be really incredibly important in success. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about here is this idea of building an effective team and collaborators. And I also think that this is huge. And as I've said many times, well, I don't think I'm necessarily the smartest bulb in the box of people I work with. I have an amazing, talented group of people and team that I have developed, that we have assembled, that I feel so grateful for. And when I look at this group, I feel like we are top notch. And that is really something that I think we all can build on. And how do we get to that point? And I'll tell you a little bit, some of it is in previous things that I've discussed, such as networking, et cetera. But some of it also is in the mentality that you take. I think when building a team, it's important to have the mindset that everyone is important. It doesn't matter if you're the person on top or you're the person on bottom. Everyone is important. It's important to recruit people who you think are better than you, are different than you, but also are motivated and have a positive vibe and emotion they can contribute to the group. It's important to, when you think of your team, to not think of them as your competition, but that their success is your success. Because working together is really the most effective way to create the best science. I think as a team, but also as a team leader, it's important to be compassionate, caring, genuinely enthusiastic, and fun. I think a lot of the best parts of this are the things we can do to incorporate fun in our group to create community. But finally, also listening and listening to what people say and their thoughts and processes. Now, with saying all this, what I don't want you to hear is that they're not times to say this is right, this is wrong, and putting in a boundary of how we're going or how someone is doing something. Those are all essential too. But I think those tend to be more inherent when you're the leader. These things often are not as focused on, but I think when you're focusing on ways people in your group are better than you and how they can add that as a value add to your group, it only expands what you can do as a whole. So I think, these ideas of the leadership quality being something where you're supportive, you're genuinely inspirational, you're honest, you're committed, you're passionate about what you do, you think of that creativity, but you do make decisive decisions. You think about problem solving, and again, that goes to the creativity and being supportive. These are the skills that are going to make your group and your team really succeed. And I want to contrast being a leader from a boss. And I say this intentionally because I think a lot of the aspects of being a boss is telling someone something to do and pushing it on them and being in command. Being a leader is much more about developing people and developing a group. And I think that becomes incredibly instrumental in overall success. When I think about being a leader and my group, and I do recognize this is, about women in science, and the people I'm presenting here are all women, but, part of that is embracing their lives together. Who was initially one of my first postdocs, got married last summer. This was a trip we took to the Metabolomics Society last year as a group, which, we figured out we were creative and we had ideas about ways to make it so everyone could go by sharing an Airbnb and doing things to cut costs. But really this aspect of embracing the life together and having fun and enrichment and support of their life in work, but also their life outside of work, it really results in increased productivity. So one other thought when it comes to teams is just this one thing I want to say about collaboration versus competition. In your career, you will have a lot of people you will end up having collaborations with, and there will be a lot of people doing what you do. But I think there's two ways to look at it. There's a way to look at it where they are your competition, but there's also the opportunity to look at it where these are the people you can collaborate with to do the best science. And since this was a Women in Science thought, I saw this quote: girls compete with each other, but women empower one another. And I think that's true with collaborations. I want to say, with a model, if you're always thinking collaboration versus competition, there may be times that you're burned and people do things that are not nice to you. But by and large, your research will be enriched and it will just expand what you know. And so I think while sometimes it may not work out, in the long run, it really does work. So with those thoughts, I just want to end on a few other things with work-life balance. I think as women in science, but also as researchers in science as a whole, this is a real challenge. And how can we think about work-life balance and what does it mean? This is actually something I talk to my team about all of the time because I just think it's absolutely crucial and it's our life. And, as I mentioned earlier, I have a family with 4 kids. There are a lot of people and there are a lot of needs. Heck, I can just show you the schedule of any day. Now, with COVID, things have changed, but we have, 3 or 4 activities a week for every kid. We have homework checks. We have lunches done every day. We have permission slips. We have events in school for all these people. We have social things going on, every day. It seems on the weekends, there's people sleeping over all the time. There's play dates, there's birthday parties, there's buying gifts. There's even just the daily disciplines of life. Did you brush your teeth? Did you do the dishes? Did you make your bed? I also will say, have you helped out with chores? Where is the laundry now? Have you cleaned up your rooms? Have you taken your showers? Who's making dinner tonight? What are we having for dinner tonight? This is a huge part of our life, right? And with more kids, this becomes more and more complicated. But it's important. We can't look at research by itself without thinking about what we're eating tonight. And the other thing I didn't put on here, but you'll see later, is the things we need, right? So we have all of these things the people in our family, our children or whatever may need that we need to make sure are being addressed. They're super important, and another thing I didn't put on here is even connection time with those kids, right? These are just a list of to-dos, but we also want to connect and have quality time with them. What else do you want to fit in? Well, you want to fit in your mind and body health and things you need to do. For me, like I said, running is one of them. And I will say and challenge you that as you go along the process of having a family, that some things may need to change. And one thing that did change dramatically for me with more kids I had was changing my schedule. So, down here is a picture of me when I was on a business trip in Paris. And I was training for a marathon. I had to run 20 miles and I was on a business trip. I got up at 5 a.m. and ran 20 miles throughout Paris and figured out a map and did it. But on a daily basis, not in COVID times, but in life prior to COVID, I would get up 5 a.m., run, be home by 6:30, do my routine with the kids and get to work. And I think the idea that you're gonna have to change your schedule to fit things in dynamically as time goes on is something you need to understand. Now, with my broken leg, my schedule and COVID, my schedule changed again. The kids are at home, needs changed, but dynamically being able to change that so you're able to fit in the needs of the family, your research, and your own mind, body, and health needs. The other thing I want to bring up here is this, and it's a hugely important topic too. When you have 2 professional careers in one family, I've told you a lot about my career. What I haven't told you is that my husband is a family practice doctor who opened up his own business 5 or 6 years ago and does family practice really in this personalized way where he goes to people's houses, he works off hours. We both have very, very crazy busy schedules. And how do we do that with 4 kids? And the answer is, you have to get help. You absolutely need to know when to get help. And this is a picture of our nanny who has been with us for several years, who is my mind when I am not there. She is the one who knows what we like and what we eat. She is the one who helps me plan every meal for what we're doing for our kids and keeps the fridge stocked with healthy food. She is the one who I go back and forth with to literally manage the kids' schedule every single day and manage what's happening when. You know, other help you may need: implementing systems, getting someone, cleaners, to come to your house and clean your house, implementing systems with your kids of what they're expected to do to clean, implementing systems with your kids of expectations of, you know, other household chores, or what homework they're to do by themselves, what homework they're to do together, implementing systems between what your spouse is supposed to do and what you're supposed to do. You know, in my house, you know, my husband just sort of naturally does all the bills. I'm a real foodie. I do a lot of the cooking. So having those systems in place becomes incredibly important. And finally, I think what is most important, and I'm saying this not only on the level of in your personal life, but in your personal life, in your mind, body, health connection life, and in your professional life, it is okay to say, no, not now. I'm busy. That doesn't work for me. You need to have boundaries. You need to know when you have to say, no, I can't be on the call at 2 a.m. in the morning, or no, I actually have something else that's important. And you need to have boundaries where your work is feeling prioritized at some time, yet your children are also feeling prioritized at some time. And this is a balance. You know, it really is a dynamic thing where at times the boundaries may be a little bit more towards work, and other times the boundaries are a little bit more towards your kids. But that's okay. But having these boundaries to keep yourself sane, I think, is crucially important. The final thing I want to say is this: you have to understand that you cannot be perfect. And perfect truly is the enemy of the good. You know, every day I think about this idea that when I'm working, I'm not being as good of a mother as I could if I was not working. I'm not able to go to the beach or necessarily do every activity with them. And when I'm at home, I'm constantly thinking, I could have been doing this work. I could have been doing that. I would have had more time for this. When you have things that are important in your life, and they're in multiple domains, you have to say, it's okay that I'm not perfect and I'm not doing everything in that area. And it's okay that I'm not doing everything in this area. I'm trying to maximize 2 areas and do the best I can in both. And inherently in that, you're not going to be as good as you can in either one if you were just doing it alone. And that's okay. But together, I would argue that you have a more fulfilled life because you've now achieved a substantial amount in multiple areas. So give yourself some grace. Tell yourself it's okay when you mess up, and realize that that is part of the process. I just want to end on this final thought. Here are some pictures of my family, starting, here when we had 2 kids. I was very early on in my career. I had just gotten my first grant. You move to 3 kids. Right here was a really difficult time for me. I was transitioning to trying to get my first big grant, but I hadn't gotten it. I hadn't written the grant on metabolomics. You transition to over here. Literally here was a point when I was told, maybe a couple months before this, right when I had number 4 here, was when I was told, Jessica, you might want to just think of shifting and not being a primary researcher, but maybe just an analyst, because you're not having luck with those grants. And by the way, you have 4 kids. Are you sure you've designed your life to be a primary investigator. It was right around this time when I got my first really big grant that was in metabolomics. And you fast forward to today when, now the kids are older and, you look at that one grant and I've had so many beyond that I can't even count. But it's important to remember this, and this is what one of my friends said to me. The days often seem very long when you have kids and when you have a family. You're exhausted. When is the day going to end? I just want to get home and relax. But the years are short. And I will tell you, going from this point of time to this point of time has been a blink of an eye. And it's always important for you to remember what really matters. And this is it. Right here is it. I can say this another way. These are my kids, and it really honestly didn't seem like that long ago, and I blink and this is what I have, So while we're focused on our career, remember what matters. Because when you have those little kids, you think this point of life is going to last forever, but it doesn't. It doesn't. So when you're struggling with the opportunity between two things, and one is that time with the kids, with someone who's been really successful with my career, I say the kids win out. I really do. I think that's what, at the end of the day, you're going to remember and you're going to be grateful for. So with that, I just want to end my talk by, these are the doors that you open to go into Harvard Yard. Probably one of the most famous yards with the most famous number of Nobel laureates and academics in the world. And I want to tell you, you have all it takes to open those doors and become part of that community. It's not just about brains. It's not just about you. It's about how you develop your team. It's about ideas. It's about ways that you can grow. And I will say, you can do it. It's not as hard as you think, and you are much more capable than you think. The issue, though, is very often we like to think of this as we're doing this by ourselves. And this is a picture from a movie that came out about a year ago. My oldest son is into rock climbing, and this is a movie about a gentleman who was rock climbing El Capitan, one of the hardest ascents in the world. And he was going to do it what is called free solo, which means he has no supports whatsoever. And if he made one mistake, he'd fall and die. What I would say to you is, you can open those gates to Harvard Yard, but I think the way to do it, and my philosophy is, for research, there's no free solo. You do that with the support of all of these people you've put in your life. And if you don't have them, you network to get them, to make it so you don't have the risk of falling. You have the support team that's going to get you to the top no matter what. So with that, I'd like to thank you and just acknowledge all these people and all the grants and stuff that have gotten me to where I am. And I apologize if I've gone over, but I hope it was valuable information.
Oh my goodness, I'm speechless, Jessica. It was such a great talk. I mean, it's one of the best talks I've ever been to, I guess, in probably a long time, and probably one of the best and memorable one. Well, we know each other, but I think I didn't know a lot of things about you. Like, for example, when you said yes and make your time, you could have said no. It's okay to say no, but you say yes to us. And we didn't know you just had a surgery and that your legs are like in a very serious condition. but here you are like with us and spending time very early in the morning, and this is really something that deserves a standing ovation. And I think a lot of us, judging from all of the comments made by everyone in attendance, I think everyone is still in awe. And not only because you're such a successful researcher, but also I think a successful person in life, in that you manage to balance everything in order to make your life like more complete. And I think what you said at the end, it's almost got me teary eyed. Like, it's okay not to be perfect. And at times when you're a mother, you know that you sometimes think that I would have done that differently if I were not here, if I was doing like only one role. And I think that kind of struggle of having to juggle these different roles at once, and like wonder sometimes if you could have done better if you had only like one role, is, I think, a thought that all of us have. And I think that really touched um, a nerve on me as well. Like, I think everyone in the audience feel that most times, and that's some, it's perfectly normal. And I think that what you brought to us today is a really complete picture of everything, like your journey. And you are a very good motivational speaker. And I think you can add one more role, not only as a marathon, a mother, a researcher, scientist, but you can also be a motivational speaker. So we're really lucky to have you. And truly thank you for your time. And there are many, many questions now from the audience, and I think a lot of them probably would like to interact with you in person. And I would like to give you a big round of applause one more time, everyone. And I think everyone is, yeah. So we're going to start the question and answer session, and our team has already gathered a list of questions from the audience, and I think you could show it now. So a lot of them, of course, give really positive feedbacks on your presentation. They think that you're a really amazing person, but they still have some questions that they would like to ask. And do we have Ibu Ana here? Ibu Ana from UIO? Yes, so
Yes.
Ibu, hello. Okay, Ibu Ana, would you like to ask the question? Should I read it for you?
Oh, hi.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. Actually, I am into research, but this this year I start my master degree in Oslo, and I think about research once I saw your advertisement about this webinars. And lucky I have I can join this webinar. So to Jessica, do you think there is any age limitation to start career as female researcher?
Yeah, I would say absolutely not. I think it's, if you're interested, you can do it, and I would encourage you to, to try. You want to acknowledge that, if you start at different places in life, there's inherently a time limit, but I don't think that matters. I think, starting in a career and building toward success can still happen.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. So definitely anytime is a good time, as long as you have the passion and drive. Okay, so the second question comes from Fatima Wali, Ibu Fatima Wali from Unstrat. She's really curious about your research productivity, and probably we all think like, okay, she has the same time as ours, 24 hours a day, but you're juggling multiple roles. So how much research do you?
So I do and I will say, as a professor, I am primarily a research professor. So I do primarily research. I do a little bit of teaching, but I'm really primarily focused on research. But I think how was I able to get an H index of 54? I think that really comes down to building a collaborative team. So you have multiple things going on at one time. If you're doing, 50% teaching and 50% research, you might not be able to get that high that quickly. But I think it's because that is more of my primary time, the thing I devote the most time to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for your answer, Ibu Fatima Wali. Does this answer your question?
Ya, terima kasih.
Okay, great, Ibu.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the third question probably relates to your role. Like in Indonesia, we have what we call like the three dharma. So we have to do three different roles. In academic, we have to do teaching and a lot of teaching, usually in Indonesia, research, and also community service, like so to the community. And we also have additional administrative tasks. So many of the lecturers in Indonesia feel like sometimes these are too much and they run out of time to manage all of these duties and like feeling swamped. And I think this is quite relatable to all of the people in the audience. So
Yeah.
can you suggest effective ways to manage your time? And this is from Ibu Lani from UKWMS.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think it gets to this, I think this is, if there was a magic pill for this, I wish I could say it, but it's not. And, I think in what I do, it's similar. They're a little bit different, but it's the same thing. You have all of these different hats you wear, even within work. I think this is where having some boundaries are absolutely essential. And where, let's say if there are, I'll give you an example for like research, and I'll tell you right now, like even I'm involved in several new COVID research projects, right? And some I'm running and some I'm a little bit more of an advisory role. I just looked at the schedule and there's now a COVID research project that's 2 hours of Zoom every Friday. And I just looked at that and I said, that is not feasible with everything else I have to do. So I'm going to start, I'm going to go to them when I can and say, I'm not available on the other times, or sometimes maybe only go for the first hour. And being okay with that, that's the thing that's hard. So I think what it is are there things you can put some type of parameters on? There's what you're required to do, but then there's what you're pushed to do. And sometimes what you're pushed to do really is not reasonable. And I think that's where you need to sort of pull back sometimes.
Okay, that's a very nice way to put it. And we have Ibu Lani Hartanti here. She also has her video on. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, because this is what I felt a long time ago, and I'm really glad that you encouraged me that it is okay, and we do have to have a boundaries and have to prioritize what is important to me. Thank you for your support and great answer.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Lani. So moving on to the next question. So it is difficult to find a perfect mentor. Do you have more than one mentor? Sometimes we encounter issues with our mentors. How should we behave in those times? And this is from Mercy, UNS.
This is a great question. And yes, absolutely. I think often what can be challenging, right, is the person who may be defined as your mentor really may not be the person who has those characteristics that you need to really guide you. So very often it may be that you need to put a couple people together to create the bigger picture of what you need. And I'll give you the example for me. Well, I think Scott, as I mentioned, was my primary mentor. I, on the side, sort of had a secondary mentor of someone who was a little bit older than me and an associate professor a female who was an associate professor with a family. And I would go to her for some of those, needs of work-life balance, some of the real nitty gritties of, as a woman, what it may take to do certain things that unfortunately may just be a little more difficult for women than it may be for men for one reason or another. So I think that's where you have to recognize where the person who's your primary mentor may not have all the skills or be able to give you everything you need. And so looking for other people, and even looking for other people who aren't even in your institution, like me, I'm happy to mentor people. I'm happy to give people advice. Taking that step and not being afraid to reach out to someone who you think may help you. And sometimes it's even a person who you don't necessarily talk to all the time, but there's certain things you just know they really understand, and it's reaching out to them once every 6 months. But find those people, and it doesn't have to be just where you are.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. Sometimes it's really difficult to really get, like not necessarily our supervisor can be our mentor, right? So, but the mentor can be in many places. Like for me now, I just found a new mentor, you. So, the second question is from the same person. Unfortunately, her electricity got caught at her house, so it's really dark, but she's still in attendance. So so she's listening. Merci, if you're listening, I'm going to read your question for you. So sometimes we struggle also with like self-confidence. So how do we convince ourselves that we have the potential to be a good researcher?
So I'm going to answer this a couple ways. As odd as this sounds, I'm still not convinced I'm a good researcher in some aspects. I think this is where that idea of grit comes into place, where it's work and perseverance and creating the right people. But I do think at the beginning, there were years I didn't think I was cut out for research. And not only, like I said, not only did I not think it, I was told it, right? Even though I'd already even gotten a research grant, I was told like, you should give up. And my mentor, Scott, had the same thing happen. He's 700 publications later, thinks about the times he was told that. So at the beginning, I don't think it's about convincing yourself that you are. It's about keeping yourself focused on the steps that you need to do and iterating them over and over and over. And each time you learn a little, and then slowly you get to the point where you're like, you realize, oh, I've learned a lot. And I think that slowly does build confidence.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think in the beginning of our career, it's quite difficult. Sometimes, you hear a lot of negativity saying that you can't do this, can't do that. So sometimes I agree that for early career researchers, that would be a very good suggestion from Jessica to just, have the grit. Okay, so the third question is from Ibu Januarti from ITS. Would you like to ask the question yourself?
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Sastia. Hello, Jessica. Today you just a very great mentor for us. My question is, of course, in the beginning, maybe the people will not notice your achievement, but in some point, when you get a lot of achievement, then some jealousy maybe occur from your partners. My question is, what will you do when your partner you trust the most turn away or steals your idea? Maybe takes away your work or steal your team member. Of course, the question is, you should not stop. You should not stop. You have to keep reaching your dream. But the problem is how to handle this problem. Sometimes it's difficult, especially if your partner uh, has the same interest area, with your research. Okay, thank you, Ms. Asti.
Yeah, this is a very good question, and it's a difficult question. And, I think I've seen this happen several times. I will say that with different people. I think there are a couple things you need to do. One is when there's a significant betrayal, I would say number one, do not let that eat you up and ruin you. Number two, I would say separate yourself from that as much as you can. You know, they've done that, they've taken that away. I would separate yourself from that person and try to move on with, you know, filling that gap. But I think creating space between you and the person who has hurt you is imperative, even if it can't be actually done physically because they're right near you, but creating some space. Don't let the bitterness, though, overwhelm you so much that ends up becoming your focus, because that can be so distracting that it ends up hurting your productivity. And the other thing I would say is, you know, in addition to separating yourself from it and, you know, probably dealing with some mental trauma, try to find something that you can focus on that will move you in the right direction. And it might be a little pivot in your research, or it might be something, you know, that you're doing slightly different that orients you just a little bit differently to help you move and separate. I think those would be the things I would say, but unfortunately it happens more than you'd want. I think the one thing though I would also say is don't respond to, you know, meanness with meanness. I would separate yourself and try to focus on you being the person who does the right thing and is kind, because at the end of the day, that is really what makes you successful.
Thank you so much, Jessica. In every area, I think we experience sometimes betrayal.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's due to like sometimes people competing with each other in a very negative way. And that happens, I guess, even in research. So Jessica gave really excellent suggestion to, like, you know, move forward and not to continue being bitter about it. It's quite hard, ya Ibu Januarti, but I hope these words can encourage you to move forward. So we have our last question, and I think this is something that everybody would like to know. So everybody have a very positive feedback, and people in Indonesia might wonder, is there any chance to get a research grant? I mean, importance of collaboration between researchers, and I think what she means is that is there a chance to get a joint research grant?
Yeah.
Between the researchers in Indonesia and Harvard University, and also what are the conditions for obtaining such grant, and what are the requirements to have a collaborative research with you on metabolomics?
Yeah, and I would encourage you to reach out, you know, and you know, right now is sort of a tricky time with COVID. You know, our group is always looking for people, you know, who have particular fits with what we do. So I definitely encourage you to reach out. I think because of COVID right now, things are a little complicated because of, you know, our country not being in the greatest place from the pandemic perspective. But there certainly are opportunities. And, you know, and I'd say, Sastia, I'd be happy to have you send, you know, people my contact information, you know, about, you know, their background. I would say right now, the types of people that I'm really looking for are a lot of people who have some type of computation programming experience or some familiarity with the analysis of metabolomic data or omic data in general. Those are the types of people that we, you know, I'd say right now my team would be looking for. But I would also just say, you know, encourage, you know, potential networking. most of my grants aren't actually through Harvard. They're mostly through the National Institute of Health. So, you know, in terms of grants and collaborating, I think the other potential collaboration would be if you had a cohort of data, you know, in some type of disease research area, human disease research area that had metabolomics. You know, when you look at the scope of my research, even though I mentioned asthma, I cover such a broad range that if you have data in metabolomics or generating it with respect to a disease, I'd love to hear about that. You know, often these collaborations start with, hey, I have this and you have this, maybe we can put it together. So I'm always open to hearing about those ideas. And like I said, I think that goes into ideas and creativity, right? Which are two of the things I highlighted that are important.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. And Indonesia has a lot of potentials also in terms of biodiversity. And then if you're interested in epidemiology, probably, you know, like research on that might also enrich your research on what's happening within the Indonesian population. So I think there's a lot of potential to collaborate. I myself are very interested to collaborate with you one way or the other. So I would like to ask Ibu Novi Yanti from UP. If you are here and you would like to say something to Jessica. Hello? Perhaps her audio is not working, but yes, definitely a lot of us here who would love to collaborate you one way or the other. Yeah. Okay, so the next slide, the question and answer session is already finished. And we just would like to summarize everything that everyone said to you today. Perhaps you don't have a chance to read all of the chats, but here are some feedbacks and messages from our participants of today's webinar. Yeah, I think your wonderful energy and that the fact that you're such an amazing woman, mother, researcher, family person, and like really extraordinary. And I hope this message would be conveyed to you and then make you even more motivated to be a great mentor and inspiration for all of us. So the next is we would like to also say our deepest appreciation by presenting you with something that we prepare. So can you show in the slide? Okay, so this is something that we made.
I love it.
Caricature. Yeah, it's a caricature for you.
That is
And
great.
this is in the background of Raja Ampat, West Papua, Indonesia, one of the most beautiful locations for diving. And if you could Google it, Raja Ampat, West Papua, it's one of the best tourist destination. Like, I mean, Bali is really famous, Lombok, Yogyakarta, but Raja Ampat is the place to be. And I hope one day we could bring you here. And if you ever visit Indonesia, to take a picture with this background. And we really, truly thank you from the heart for sharing your wisdom with the scientific communities in Indonesia. So we'll be sending you the picture of this caricature as well as a sign of our thank you.
Oh, I love it. That is fabulous.
And the cloth that you are wearing in this picture is batik, which is our national costume. So we wear batik a lot, and this is also one kind of batik. So many different kind of prints. So one day if I meet you again, hopefully soon, I'll bring you the printed picture and the batik.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Okay. And next, we would like to also thank Prof. Oki Kanarajasa for attending 4 series and giving us 4 openings and 4 different topics. It's so amazing, Prof. Oki, for your tremendous support to us. And this is really rare, I think, that we have a director from the ministry attending webinar 4 times in every week. And we truly thank you also for sharing your wisdom with the scientific communities in Indonesia. And this one is with the background of Tobalek, Pauki. Perhaps you've been there. I haven't been there, but I hope to go there one day. And we would like to end this talk by turning on our audio and give Jessica again a big round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Jessica.
Thanks so
Terima
much.
kasih Prof. Oki, terima kasih Mrs. Jessica.
Thank you,
Terima
Jessica.
kasih.
Terima kasih, Pak Oki. Terima kasih, Bu Sastia.
Thank you.
Jessica.
And finally, just a little bit of reminder that we have a very big
Thank
event
you.
tomorrow. Next slide, please. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. As you know, this event is also available freely later on. We recorded the talk, and if you would like to share the really, really inspiring talk you received today firsthand and interact with Professor Jessica directly. But if you want to share the material, you can share from our YouTube link and feel free to make it viral so that many people could have the benefit from the mentorship Jessica shared for us today. And next, please. Would like to also remind you that we will distribute to you the certificates of attendance at the latest 7 days after the event. Next, please. And this is also a very special event. So tomorrow, at the end of the Girls in Science and World Class Scientists, we have a very important event at 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Indonesian time, attended by our Minister for Research and Technology, and also one of the Director Generals and a really important role model of Indonesian professor, Professor Herawati Supolo Sudoyo, who's also a geneticist, and she studies about genetic disease and she works as a senior research fellow and a vice director of our prime research institute, Ekman Institute for Molecular Biology. We also have a talk show attended by Indonesians undergraduate students, all female. We invite them specially to attend this talk show, and this is to bring the importance of evening the number. And I hope that many of our events here, by presenting to you world-class scientists and also two of the great world-class scientists, Professor Eriko Takano last week and also Professor Jessica Lasky-Su this week, will give us a more balanced perspective on like many different kinds of scientists from all over the world. And hopefully tomorrow's event, also held in Indonesia. I hope Jessica can come if you can for a short time. If not, then it's fine. But yeah, tomorrow we will have also the announcement of the essay winner from the Girls in Science essay competition. So stay tuned. It's going to be available in the Ristek BRIN YouTube channel. And we hope that you would spread out this news to all of your students to get the benefit from tomorrow's event as well. So with that, I would like to close this today's event by thanking all of you for your kind participation and for being very loyal to us, staying with us, and many of you attended all the 4 series. And again, thank you for Professor Oki, Professor Jessica, and Professor Femi, and also Ibu Neni for attending today's talk from ForMIND Institute, and for all of the team for all of your hard work. So give a big round of applause to our team also in ForMIND Institute for bringing a very successful webinar series for the World Class Scientist series this time. Okay, well, I would like to close this by saying thank you once again, and I hope to see you in the next event held by ForMIND Institute, and hopefully we can collaborate again with Professor Jessica in the next chance, and also with Ristek BRIN. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Bye.
wabarakatuh. Makasih Pak Putri, Mbak
Thank
Saskia.
you.
Thank you so much. See you all.
Terima kasih Mbak Sasti. Nice meeting you again.
Sampai ketemu lagi.
Terima kasih Jessica.
Terima kasih, Jessica.
Thank
Oki.
you.
Oki, terima kasih, Pak.
Okay, terima kasih. Jessica, please get well soon.
Thank you.
Yes, looking forward to seeing you in marathon next year.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, Jessica. We love you.